I want to do like a Substack live today to talk about a few things. One of the things I want to talk about is we just, and Mary would know this, is that this is like a bit of a worldwide phenomenon that we've got. Thanks, Crystal, for joining. Thanks a lot. We've got a bit of phenomenon at the moment where far right-wing parties around the world are starting to sort of well, they have been for a while, but starting to gain a little bit of traction and they're starting to get quite popular. And in Australia, and they're sort of like similar to MAGA parties, so it's like very similar to the Trump administration. A lot of these parties, they're very big on talking about immigration's a big problem, all that sort of stuff. Generally run by people who aren't that well educated, like Donald Trump. They don't, they sound stupid, that sort of thing. These are the best and the brightest. Oh my God, Pauline Hanson. Yes. Hi, T. Good to see you again, T. In Australia, a couple of days ago, we had an election. And now it wasn't a national election. It was just an election for one seat, like what you got in America, like a special election. A special election where like someone has left so it's just a one-off election for one particular seat. But what it does show is that the far right-wing party in Australia, hi there, hi T, that's guy. The far right-wing party in Australia is starting to gain some traction. And it's gaining traction. It's taking votes away from the centre-right party. So what you're seeing in America, like for example, in America, MAGA overtook the Republican Party. And the Republican Party before Trump was a centre-right party, but under Trump, it became more of a far right-wing party. And in the United Kingdom, hi, Maura, thanks for joining. In the United Kingdom, you're seeing the same thing in the United Kingdom at the moment. You're seeing the Nigel Farage party, the Reform Party, is now becoming the major party as well then. Thanks, Paula. Thanks for joining. Thanks, it's time. And so we're seeing this rise of a far right-wing parties, whether it's Trump in America, in Australia, there's a party called One Nation. And One Nation used to get about 10% of the votes in Australia and always polled around 10%. But at the moment, they're polling about 20%. So they've actually taken over the centre-right party. So in Australia, the centre-right party, which used to be like the old Republican Party, no longer really exists anymore and has now been replaced by a far right-wing Trump-like party. And you're seeing this all around the world. So what is happening around the world, and what you're seeing is that centre-right parties are kind of being pushed aside and being replaced by far right-wing parties. Now, in Australia, the centre-left party, which is the Labor Party, the parties in power, is still the favourite party in Australia. So when they do polling, the centre-right party in Australia still polls a lot better than the far right-wing party. And we also have a thing called preferential voting, which is ranked choice voting. And that means that if you vote Greens, chances are your vote's going to end up in the centre-right party. As we're in America, you vote Greens, it's just a dead vote. It doesn't go anywhere. So that's a good way to stop far right-wing parties from gaining power. So what's happening? Why are we seeing a rise in far right-wing parties all around the world? And I think the reason for that is because does that bring people to the left, increase of those numbers? Does that bring people to the left, increase of those numbers? It's time. Well, I guess it's a very hard thing to say because in a sense, there has definitely been, I think, hi Virginia, thanks for joining. I think the shift has been away around the world, whether you look at America, Australia, the trend seems to be that people don't like the two major parties. Most Western countries like America, Australia, the UK, Europe, all that, they have two major parties, generally a centre-left party and a centre-right party. Now, they might have some minor parties, but they only get a small percentage of the vote. And what we're seeing now is we're seeing a group of people around the world who are moving away from the major parties. They think that the centre-left party and the centre-right party are basically the same party with slight differences. And so they want to do something different. We saw this exact same thing when Trump was elected in 2016 in America. Why did a lot of people vote for Trump in 2016? Now, a lot of people in America will say racism. All that. I don't think that's the main reason. The main reason they voted for Trump in 2016, and remember, a, a significant amount of these people were people who initially voted for Obama, was they wanted to blow up the system. They wanted to blow up the two-party system. And the reason they wanted to do that is because they didn't think that the system was working for them. So what you have is you have the big divide around the world at the moment is not necessarily between left wing and right wing, or cultural shifts. It's more between young people and older people. So what you're finding is that older people are generally voting towards more right wing parties, and younger people are voting towards more left wing parties. So to put that in perspective, in Australia, if you're a 25-year-old woman, you're more likely to vote for the Greens than you are, which is the more progressive party, than you are to vote for the Labor Party, the centre left, or the centre right. If you're a young man, you are generally more to the right. Now, that doesn't mean you'll vote for a far right-wing party. You could vote for the centre-left party. So a female in her 20s is more likely to be more progressive, even more progressive than the centre-left party, and a male in the same age group, like just say 25, 26, is more likely to be either centre-left or centre-right, or they might be attracted to the more far right-wing party. So there is an age thing, there is a gender thing as well, but the age thing seems to be the big thing. Thanks, Evelyn, for joining. Thank you, Evelyn. Thanks, Virginia. And the big thing is, I think at the moment what you're seeing in the United States and what you're seeing in Australia and Europe and Scandinavia and all those, because the thing for people out there in America to know is what happens in Europe and what happens in Australia and what happens in New Zealand and will end up happening in America. I think people in America sometimes think that it's isolated and what's happening there is not happening. The trend is very big because you have to remember that people these days, whether you're in Australia, in America, in the United Kingdom, or in Europe, most people don't get their news, especially if they're under the age of 50. They're not getting their news from watching the news at 6:00 at night, the old legacy media. That's not how people get their news anymore. They get their news online. And like, for example, to give you an example, if I'm on Twitter or if I'm just online somewhere on TikTok or some other social media network, Facebook or whatever, I could easily get American news. A lot of the news that is shown in Australia on social media is American news. Why is that? Because Trump does more crazy things than Australian politicians do. So generally, it gets pushed to the top of the algorithm, right? So a lot of the stuff that Trump does goes to the rest of the world. A lot of the people, younger people, they're not looking at local news, they're looking at world news. And a lot of that world news is dominated by America because that's, the United States is the country that whatever the United States does affects the rest of the world. So the rest of the world is looking at America. America goes to Iran, that affects the rest of the world. It increases oil prices in Australia, Europe, and everything. So we're all swimming in the same pool in terms of media to some degree, right? So that's why when you see trends happening in politics, it will happen everywhere. And I'm talking about Western countries like liberal democracies, right? Thank you, William Tuesday, for joining. So the big thing at the moment that's happening, as I said before, is it's not a divide between the left and the right. It's not a divide between centre left and centre right. There is a very big age divide. People like, for example, Fox News. What is the average age of a Fox News viewer? The average age of a Fox News viewer is like 75 or 80, right? Now there's probably some people on here who might fit, into an older age group. I don't know. And of course, it doesn't mean everyone who's older is a Trump supporter or right wing. I'm just talking in terms of numbers, data, numbers, all that sort of stuff. But the biggest issue that you're going to start seeing around the world, and it's going to start happening soon, it's already started happening, is that the biggest voting bloc in America, Australia, and Europe is boomers. They generally will have the biggest voting bloc. And they're also people who vote the most. You're more likely to vote if you're a boomer than you are if you're a Gen Z or a millennial, right? But they also have a big voting bloc. But what's happening is as boomers get older and they phase out, pass away, whatever, just naturally, what happens is Gen Z and millennials are going to become the biggest voting bloc. And that's probably going to start happening in the next 5 or 10 years. It's already starting to happen. So what we're going to start seeing is that where politicians in the past would direct their policies towards cause of the systems, it's time. Cause of the systems were failing because Republicans constantly put forward dysfunctional elements in policies and laws that are made. The AHCA, Affordable Healthcare, which weaken its Republican states even made state laws to weaken it. Exactly, it's time. Exactly. Thanks, Barbara. Thanks for joining. Yeah, exactly right. Exactly. It's a lot of what you're going to start seeing is as the polling, as the people voting, majority of people voting become younger, and I'm talking Gen Z millennials, you're going to start seeing politicians, I think, you're going to start seeing politicians pander to younger groups. And you're already seeing that in Australia at the moment, where the demographics are changing, right? So that means like things like they might, for example, they might put taxes, like, you might get taxed for your home. Like if you sell your home, you might get a tax, whatever it is. Things that can make it, easier for young people to buy homes, all that sort of stuff. So we're going to start seeing, I think climate change might be starting to take it more seriously, right? Because at the moment, a lot of politicians, they can get enough votes from older generations who are more likely to be conservative than they will from younger generations, younger, more right-winged. No, the younger are definitely more left-wing. Yeah, the younger are definitely more left-wing. The only caveat to that is young men, right? Now, under Donald Trump, young men, I'm talking about 2024 election, they did swing over more. They did swing over more towards Trump in that period, and that was because that was more of a cultural thing, though, because a lot of Trump went on the Joe Rogan show. He went on all these podcasts and things like that. And so culturally, he brought a lot of young men into the party. However, what's happened since then is a lot of the young people have gone back to the Democrats, right? Because Trump lied to them, right? Obviously, Trump lied. We all know he lied, but they got caught out in the lie, right? And so it's one thing to tell people what they want to hear, which is what Trump did, and it's another thing to when you get into power. Here's the thing about someone like Trump, right? When he's campaigning to win an election, he will say and do whatever he can to get elected, right? He will say do whatever he can to get elected, which is good. That can help you get elected. The best thing that could have happened to Trump is get elected. The worst thing that could have happened to Trump is get elected. And what I mean by that is once you get elected, everything that you said was going to happen will then be exposed as a lie, right? So had Trump not been elected, right, people might have still believed a lot of the stuff he said. And in the future, they would have gone, if only Trump had won, right, all these bad things wouldn't have happened. But because he lost, and so they would have continued to believe it. But Trump being elected in some ways is also the thing that's going to kill MAGA. Because now because being elected exposed all the lies. When he said, I'm going to end the wars in Ukraine on day one, well, everyone knows that was a lie. When he said I was going to bring down inflation, now everyone knows it's a lie. When he said he wasn't going to start any new wars, well, everyone knows it's a lie. So everything has been exposed. That's why his polling numbers have come down so much, right? Because all his lies have been exposed. Now, had he lost the election, the hardcore MAGA people would have continued to believe that these things could have easily been resolved had he won. So the only and I'm not saying it's a good thing that he won. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm just saying that him winning exposed his lies, right? and if he had he lost against Kamala, there would have been the group of MAGA would have continued on to believe that he was going to do all those things, and nobody would have ever known whether that's true or not because he wasn't elected. So I guess from that sense, that's what I'm saying is, so a lot of young people did gravitate towards Trump back in those days, back in 2024. But you know, a lot of them have come back to the Democratic Party. Bro, that would mean something if we have midterms. Bro, that would mean something if we have midterms. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I think you are going to have midterms. Look, I think there will be midterms elections. I really do. I think there will be midterms, and I think the midterms will be. I'm being serious, bro. That would mean something. Yeah. So it's time. Are you saying you don't think there's going to be midterms? Is that what you're saying? Because I actually do think there will be midterms. I think Donald Trump will try everything to try to turn things into, yeah, I wish you were right. Yeah. Look, I really do. Bahama Grandma, thanks for joining. Yeah, look, I do think that, I do think that he will step aside. I really do. I do think he'll step aside. I think the gerrymandering thing that he's doing, the gerrymandering thing that he's doing is not going to be as effective as people think it is. Now, obviously, the gerrymandering thing is bad, right? But the thing about gerrymandering is that if there's at the moment, I respectfully disagree with you. That's all right. You don't have to agree with me. I fully understand why you wouldn't agree with me. But I do think that there's enough checks and balances to stop that from happening, right? I do think there's enough checks and balances to stop that happening. I think Trump Trump will try to do everything he can. I hope Karen F's. I hope complacency on the left doesn't allow the Republicans to stay in control. Yeah, exactly, Karen. I agree. Look, the complacency for me is that what I think Democrats should concentrate on is talking about things that matter to independents and talking about things that matter to individuals. Hi, Paolo. Thanks for joining, Paolo. Things that matter. Thanks for joining. I think the things that they need to talk about is day-to-day things. All right. Unfortunately, a lot of people like independents and hi, Paolo. A lot of people like independents and swing voters. They're not as concerned about Trump being authoritarian or Trump saying this or saying that. They're more concerned about cost of living, inflation, maybe the war in Iran, that sort of stuff, right? They're more concerned about day-to-day stuff. And I think the way Democrats win is by focusing on the economy. I'm not finding that with most of the younger population, even the rest says complacency. I'm not finding that with most of the younger population, even the rest of complacency. Yeah. So, yeah, I just think from the point of view of trying to win over voters, you do really want to concentrate on bread and butter issues, right? I think the problem in 2024 was that is that a lot of people were not paying attention to politics, and so a lot of people were not paying attention to politics, and they were just thinking about how come the rent is expensive? How come I'm young and I can't afford to buy a home like my parents did? Cost of living was going up, all that sort of stuff, right? And so they blame who's ever in power, right? And this isn't just an American thing. It's happening in Australia, the United Kingdom, Europe, and stuff like that. There are less people now who pay attention to politics than there ever have been. Kate 101, MAGA is imploding, and those in White House are protecting Trump, are protecting their pockets. Exactly right, Kate. Thanks, Laurel, for joining. Thanks, Issa, for joining. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. Thanks for the love hearts. I love the love hearts. Press the love hearts. Press those love hearts. I love that. Yeah, thanks for joining. But yeah, I agree. MAGA is imploding. I think the only the worst thing for the worst thing for Trump at the moment is not becoming not becoming super popular. Do you know what I mean? I think a lot of people on um, on the right, even Republicans in Congress, don't like Trump. I think it's fair to say that there are a lot of Republicans in Congress who don't like Trump, but they're too scared to say it. Right? Uh, that it's time. That's why Trump is not going to allow election. History bears that out. Get real. Look, the fact of the matter is that Trump did try to steal the 2020 election, but ultimately he wasn't able to do it. Yeah, and I think the reason why I don't think he can stop the election is because a lot of the election stuff in America comes down to states, not to the federal government, not to the national government. So there is not a lot that Trump can do to stop elections that wouldn't get overturned by the courts in a very, very quick way. And I also don't think do they have an army of ice fed by they have an army of ice fed by felons. Um, so I look, in my opinion, I know there's people out there who aren't going to believe me. I do think the midterms are going to go ahead. I think the Democrats are going to do very well. Um, I think the Democrats are going to do very well. I think in 2028, it's going to be a different type of election. I don't think Trump is going to run for a third term. I think he's too old. I think Trump is going to pardon himself, pardon everyone around him, including his family, and he's just going to go off. Now, I will say this, even if Trump doesn't run in 2028, which I don't think he will, um, he still has a lot of power. And the power in America, like if you look at the last elections, right? Look at the last elections, right? The last elections that we just recently had in where was it? I think it was in Indiana, right? Indiana. I think it was Indiana. And you had a whole bunch of special elections for the primaries for who was going to be the Republican elected people for the next election. Who was going to be the primary? Now Trump endorsed the most of the people that Trump endorsed won. I pray he gets impeached before long, Paula. Yes. Yeah. It probably not, unfortunately, Paula, it's probably not going to happen because they probably won't have enough people to impeach him. But I will say this I want to see Democrats talking about how the massive corruption is dragging us down economically. Tallarico and others thread the corruption needle well. Yeah, I completely agree, T. I am a big fan of James Tallarico for a couple of reasons, Steve. One of the reasons is because it's very unusual in America at the moment to see someone who's very religious, like James is very openly religious, but also always talks about the separation of church and state, right? The separation of church and state used to be something that was talked about in America all the time, including by religious people. So you would have religious politicians and they would say, I'm a big believer in God. I think God's amazing, but my belief in God is my private belief and has nothing to do with my politics. Now, politics in America is all about you're a Christian nationalist. Pete Hegseth always like talks about the Bible while he's talking about bombing people, like talking about bombing people and then talking about the Bible, So James Tallarico, I feel, is bringing through a different type of Christianity. Now, I will preface this with saying I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God, but I was brought up a Catholic, so I spent most of my life as a Catholic. But I am an atheist now. But I will say that I'm not against religion. I'm not saying that I don't think religion should exist. I'm not one of those atheists. But I'm just saying that it's nice to have a politician always talk about the separation of church and state. I think that's really important. And also talk about the fact that, like as you said, T, Tallarico will always talk about religion in it, but he'll also talk about corruption. right? And he always brings up corruption, things like that. And I think corruption is a really important thing. Now, you always have to tie corruption to a specific thing. Now, the problem with corruption, and I think why it doesn't always work as your number one thing, is there's a lot of, Kate, hopefully gerrymandering backfires on, wait a second, let me just read that. Hopefully gerrymandering backfires on Trump, but Dems need to step up and be more vocal. Exactly right, Kate. It's time. Yeah, they use it. Doesn't mean anything to them. Pete's a figuring out corruption. Exactly. Paolo, the Pope is complicating things for MAGA. As a former Catholic, what are you thinking about that? Well, as a former, yeah, I do. I think it does. I think, I think the thing about whether you're a Catholic or not, if you're a Trump supporter and you're a Catholic, I still don't think, I think most of those people would still like Trump. I still think there's those people who still like Trump. I don't think, because think about all the things that Trump has done his whole life. He's not exactly the most Christian person, and yet he got the majority of support of the evangelicals, right? So I don't think people will stop voting for Trump because the Pope doesn't, because he's having an argument with the Pope. I don't think that's the way MAGA work, right? One of the funniest things I ever seen was in 2016, and Trump was being interviewed by two reporters. And obviously these two reporters knew that Trump didn't know anything about the Bible, all right? He didn't know anything about the Bible. And they asked him questions about, they said, you're very religious now, because, he was trying to make out like he found God again and all that. And they said to him, what's your favorite book, the Old Testament or the New Testament? And he says, I wouldn't want to say, both equally. They're both incredible books, right? Now, everyone with half a brain knew he has never read the Bible. But even with all that obvious lies that Trump does about, believing that he's a Christian or that, they still voted for him. So again, I think Christians will vote for him, whether he fights with the Pope, or whether he doesn't fight with the vote, or, he cheats on his wife with a porn star. He tells people about grabbing people by the, he was found liable of sexual assault, and they still voted for him, right? So an argument with the Pope is like down the bottom here to what Trump has done in terms of anti-Christian things, right? So I don't think it's going to make any difference. I think the Catholics who like Trump already sort of, it was already baked in that Trump isn't a very religious guy. So I don't think it's going to make a big difference from that point of view. Unfortunately, I wish it would make a difference, but it doesn't. I don't think, unfortunately, right? Yeah, I don't think, unfortunately, character. I think what Trump has shown is that character. I think you're right about the evangelicals, but he got 53% of 53% of the Catholics. Yeah. Catholics in 2024. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't know about the Catholics in general, but he depicted himself as Jesus and still has support. Exactly. Yeah. Look, the thing is, Karen and Paolo, is Trump has done so many crazy things that I always find it, when Trump depicted himself as Jesus, he's a piece of shit. Yeah, exactly. When Trump predicted, put himself, sent a post as himself as Jesus, a lot of people freaked out about that, right? And they went, I can't believe he's doing this. Now, to me, I'll be honest with you, I was freaked out that people were freaked out about it. That was like, if I was to look at the last 10 years, him depicting himself as Jesus would be right down the bottom of things that he's done that is awful. Like that's what surprised me. I was surprised that people cared about that. Because now, if someone like Joe Biden had done that, I 100% would understand why people would freak out, because Joe Biden never did things like that. It would have been out of character for Joe Biden to depict himself as Jesus. So I understand why there was an outrage. There would be an outrage against Joe Biden or Obama. But in terms of the outrage against Trump, I actually didn't understand why there was an outrage. And not because I agree with what he did, but because he does so many crazy things every day that it was like, for me, it was nowhere near the worst thing he's ever done. Yeah, and as Karen said, the outrage didn't last long. Yeah, again, I don't think it changed the mind of most of the people who support him. I don't think they care about that stuff because it's all baked in. Their people aren't voting for Trump because they think he's a really nice guy. People are not voting for Trump because they think he's posting really beautiful things and he wants to bring everyone together. Some people, I'm talking about the MAGA base here, not independents or swing voters who vote for him. A lot of the MAGA base voted for him because he's an asshole, right? They voted for him because he does this stuff. They think it's really funny. They think it's edgy and they love this stuff. There has never been a political party in America that so openly courted the votes of assholes, right? Assholes never had a party that they could, I'm sure there are people who maybe thought of the old Republican Party with George W. as assholes, but just generally speaking, George W. Bush invaded Iraq and did some really bad things. But in terms of what he said and how he talked to people, it was more respectful than what Donald Trump does. And so um, Trump courts people who are assholes, like literally, like people who make fun of other people who make fun of people with disabilities, all that stuff. He makes those people feel at home, right? And he makes those people, and that's why they voted. So when Trump, Pollock, his response that he was dressed as a doctor diffused it, people just talked it up to senility and why get mad. Yeah, I mean, I don't even think it's that, Paulo. I think when somebody does crazy things 100 times a day, people become immune to it, right? And so that they're just used to Trump doing crazy things, and his own base don't care. They honestly don't care about that stuff. They could be religious and find it funny. You know, so I think a lot of the MAGA base, they see Trump as up the top, they see religion underneath Trump, but Trump is their number one figure, and anything else goes below Trump. They just don't care about that. Like if you're going to care about him posting himself as a doctor, then you would have, who knew being an arsehole would have such appeal? Yeah, exactly. I mean, Karen, he's basically exposed that about 20 to maybe 30% of eligible voters in America are assholes. I mean, that's the fact of the matter is because he courts those people. He courts people who are not nice people. And he makes those people feel at home. And then there are other people who vote for Trump or other right wing parties around the world, like more sort of populist right wing parties, because they want to blow up the system, right? They just want to blow up the system. That's their number one thing. They don't like the centre left party. They don't like the centre right party, and they want to blow it up. They want to start with something new. And so they don't really. So this is what happened in Australia. As for people who came in a little bit later, a couple of days ago, we had a election in Australia. It wasn't like a federal election. It was just a one-seat election, like a special election like you have in America. But a far right-wing person won that seat. That particular seat was before then held by a centre-right person, not a centre-right, right? And so what's happened in Australia, and it's happening around the world, is the centre-right party is disappearing and it's been replaced by far right-wing people. Now, I think it's a mixture of the economy. For a lot of people, the economy is not working. Second, I think there's a lot of people who blame and then immigration is blamed on everything that goes wrong in their life. And I think this is a big problem. I think there's a big problem in the world at the moment where you have people who are attracted to political parties and they don't really care about the person at the helm of it. Nobody cares about what Trump is. I think too many people on the left, and including myself, believe that character actually matters. I actually don't think character matters as much anymore these days in a political leader. Well, not for the right anyway. I think on the right, character is like down the bottom, right? Um, I think telling them what they want to hear, talking about the deep state, being anti-establishment, saying that you're going to blow up the system. And some of these people who vote for him, some of them don't even particularly like Donald Trump. They just like the fact that he was doing something different, right? So it's a weird situation where you have so many people at the moment. Yeah. Thanks, Karen. Hi, Laura. Thanks for joining. Thanks, CMDR. Cool. Thanks for joining as well. So basically, I think there's a big problem at the moment where a lot of people are attracted to these far right wing. Man, the cult is anchored for Fox. Yeah, but the thing is, it's time is that this isn't just. I don't think this is just a Trump thing, right? Because it, if it was just a Trump thing, it wouldn't be happening in Australia, America, um, Europe, the UK, all around the world. Trump took advantage of something that was already happening around the world. He came in at the right time. Had Trump come in 10 years earlier, I don't think he would have won. Trump came in at a time when the world was looking for something different. They wanted to blow up the system, and people were sick of center left and people were sick of center right, and they wanted something different to happen, right? And I think a lot of this stuff happening after the global financial crisis. After the global financial crisis, a lot of people struggled economically, right? After COVID, even more so. After COVID, a lot of house prices went up, rents went up, but wages didn't go up, right? So people are looking to political parties that are offering something different. And these are people who maybe they don't necessarily think are going to fix their problem, but they just want to blow up the system. How many times, like in Australia, with media's are all using Fox media tactics and using other countries like they did in Hungary? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Now I will say it's time that I think it's more that the thing is it's more than just media because I think what's going on is there is something real happening, and there are people taking advantage of that, right? There are people taking advantage of it. The media can only do something if the conditions are right. If the economy was doing well and and rents weren't going up, right? Cost of living wasn't going up, and young people were able to buy homes without getting money from their parents, then it would be much harder for the media to manipulate anything because there wouldn't be enough voters to fall for it because they would feel their lives were okay. The media can only take advantage of these things, or right-wing parties can only take advantage of it if the conditions are right for it, right? And so the material conditions in Australia, America, the UK, Europe, the only reason Trump got elected and why other right-wing parties, far right-wing parties got elected in Europe is because there were so many people, their everyday life experience was telling them that something really bad was happening. And they were looking at their parents, or things were getting worse for them. And so then you have someone like Trump who comes in and he says, "I'm going to blow up the system. It's unfair. All these people," and obviously he was lying. Now we all know he was lying, but the thing is when you're struggling and you're like a working class person and you got young children. And I agree with that, I know, but it's indeed a huge part of the cult idealism. Again, like, yeah, exactly. Look, I agree. And again, I agree, like Viktor Orban in Hungary is very similar to the Trump administration. And the reason for that is because Viktor Orban was elected in 2010. Trump came in 2016, and it was Roger Stone, Steve Bannon, all the big Trump people were looking at what Viktor Orban was doing in Hungary, and they wanted to replicate that with Trump administration. So it's no coincidence that those two parties are very close. And the thing about Trump is A lot of people will say Trump is Hitler. Trump is not Hitler, right? Trump is Viktor Orban. Trump never wanted to be Hitler. He wanted to be Viktor Orban. Trump had to stay in for an entire day after his election. Yeah. Trump, if you want to look at the roadmap, if you want to look at what the Trump administration did when they came in 2024, they came in using the same tactics as what Viktor Orban is. Now, Viktor Orban, this is the difference between Hitler and Viktor Orban. It's a pretty big difference, right? Hitler wouldn't threaten Greenland with military action and then tackle out. He would have done it. He just would have done it, right? So again, like Trump, reading it. Hi, Barbara. Yeah, hi, Barbara. Trump is cruel. Yeah, 100% is very cruel. Reading off into the sunset. Thanks for joining. So when you look at what Viktor Orban did, what did Viktor Orban do? He used the existing systems. Viktor Orban didn't send the military in to go after the media. You know what he did? He used an FCC, like America has the FCC, a similar FCC system in Hungary to make public government news media more favourable to him. It's time. Hungarians woke up, and what they did is made it so dangerous for Fox to continue working in their country. They find out the lead. Yeah, exactly. So, Kate, Trump isn't religious in the least and brought racist and looking up the mob. He was very angry, bloody man who needed attention. Exactly. Yeah. See, the thing with like, if you look at people like Mussolini, Hitler, Stalin, right, or Pol Pot, Mao, all these leaders from the past, these like authoritarian leaders, many of them were ideological. They read philosophy books, right? Hitler was a big fan of Nietzsche. They all read these philosophical books, right? All this sort of stuff. Trump is not like that. He's not ideological, right? He doesn't care about whether he wants to get what he wants to get. And it's not based on ideology. It's based on he just wants to get whatever he can. So that he doesn't have an ideological. Now, yeah, Trump, yeah, exactly. Funny. Yeah, Trumpy is it? Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, all the other leaders, to some degree, were people who read a lot. It doesn't mean they were necessarily intelligent, but they read a lot, right? They wrote and read a lot. Trump doesn't do that. Trump is like a reality TV star who wants to be an authoritarian, right? His ideology, his being is all about reality TV. What's reality TV? Right? It's all about ratings. It's all about, right here, right now. I just want it to happen right now. Reality TV is not about ideology. It's about whatever works for you, right? So, his ideology is hate, exactly. So Trump is a reality TV star turned authoritarian. Now, in some ways, that's bad, but in some ways, that's good because he has the attention span of a goldfish, right? And because of that, and because there's no overriding ideology, sometimes he gets bored. He'll get bored of things. Like, for example, with Greenland, right? He gets bored of Greenland and he moves on. And he doesn't invade Greenland. So, I want to annex Canada. Then he stops talking about it. Then he stops talking about you know what I'm getting at, right? If that was Hitler, if that was Mao, if that was Stalin, they wouldn't get bored of it. They would actually go and do it. They would just do it because there's a massive ideology behind it. So the best thing, like often I hear people say, taco, 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 as a derogatory thing. In my opinion, Trump being taco is his best quality. Right? It's his best quality because Hitler never tacoed. Stalin never tacoed. Mao never tacoed, right? They would just do it. So there is a difference. It's the taco bit of him. And that's what I think is that Trump is beatable. And that's why I think Trump is beatable. Trump can be beaten, just like Viktor Orban was beaten. And I've got to say this, in Hungary, they did not have the same checks and balances that the United States have. It was much easier for Viktor Orban to do what he did in Hungary than it would be for Trump. Paolo, his was the first generation to grow up with TV. and stop reading. It's the water he swims, and he's illiterate on top of it. Exactly, Paolo, 100%. Yeah, he's the least intelligent person, and the funniest thing is, right? The funniest thing is that he's the people who support him think he's very highly intelligent, right? They would make fun of Kamala Harris. Remember, they would make Trump would and MAGA would make fun of. They would say, "Oh, the word salad. Oh, it's the word salad," like that. And I would just think they're the least people to. That's when you kind of know it's a cult when you're following someone who's one of those the most low. And Trump always calls everyone else low IQ. Like everyone is low IQ. He even called Barack Obama low IQ, right? Um, and the only reason you do that is that if you feel insecure about your own intelligence, right? The only people who make fun of other people's looks is when you feel badly about your own looks. People who make fun of other people's IQ, right? It's like it's time. Army of MAGA is ice cream with massive million square feet, prison being built around the country. Exactly. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, exactly. And so Trump just like projects everything that he feels insecure about himself and he projects it onto other people. And because he knows he has a base who have lost all critical thinking skills, because the MAGA base is probably the least critical thinking skills that I think it has ever existed. Um, and the funniest thing I love about this is one of the things I love about MAGA. If you ever go on Twitter, a lot of the MAGA accounts on there, they often put themselves as independents, right? On their accounts, they have, I'm an independent and who thinks for myself with high critical thinking skills. Now, so this is hilarious because they think they will call themselves nonpartisan. So they think because you're voting for Trump, right, you're nonpartisan because Trump is not really a Republican or a Democrat. So they feel like they're independent. Paolo, calling people low IQ is a way of showing you have exactly, Paolo, exactly right. Yeah, exactly. Why would you call someone like that low IQ? Now, I've told this story. Why would you use tweet exactly? I've told this story 100 times, right? So I'll just take it one more time. Um, this projection thing is pretty well known. Like when I was in school, there was a guy I went to school with, and he was very homophobic. Now this was the 90s. He's about himself and never will be satisfied or happy. Big time insecure, probably with dementia. Exactly. Um, and when I went to school with this guy, he was always making gay jokes all the time. Now, when I went to school, making gay jokes wasn't that strange, but he was obsessed with making gay jokes. And so we would be talking about football or whatever, and somehow he would make a joke about gay people. And even the most homophobic people in my school were like, Andrew, enough. Like this guy, he was like obsessed with gay jokes. Anyway, I left school. I never saw him for years and years. And when I was about 22 or 23, I was in Sydney, and Sydney's a very openly gay area, especially in the city. And I was walking through the city and I heard someone scream out, Joe. And I turned around and it was Andrew, the guy, the homophobic guy from school, except he was holding another guy's hand. He was in a gay relationship. And it worked out. And he was like completely different guy, very fun to talk to. We had a great time talking to him. But then when I went away, I was like, how is that Andrew? He hated gay people. And then I realized is that he was obviously gay in high school, but he thought by acting homophobic, people wouldn't pick up on the fact that he was gay. Exactly. He was projecting. He thought he could protect himself by being the most anti-gay person in school. But in hindsight, I kind of felt like it did the opposite, right? But anyway, you know, but that's what I think Trump is like. Or, like all when you hear all these people in the Republican Party or conservatives who are always anti-gay, and then you find out they're in a gay relationship, like, Kristi Noem's husband, right? A conservative. And we find out that Kristi Noem's husband in his spare time and not making any judgment here, not making any judgment on Kristi Noem's husband at all. But but he liked to put balloons as breasts and have videos with people while he dressed up as a woman with balloons as breasts. And this was from a person who was, from a family where Christy Nome would often say things about the gay community, the LGBT community, the trans community, and all that. And at the same time, her husband is dressing up as a woman with balloons, right? And the worst part about that for me was, I don't know if you saw the photo of Christy Nome's husband when he had the balloons, is he would have the nipples, like he had like one nipple up here, and then he had like another nipple down here, though, like the fake nipples on the things. And that to me I never liked, because if you're going to go to the effort of having fake balloon breasts, at least put the nipples in the right, symmetrical area. That's all I'm saying. But otherwise, I have no problem with it. That was the asymmetrical. Do you know what I mean? Just keep it straight. That's the only thing I'm saying. That's my only criticism. Do whatever you want. Yeah. Yes, definitely some asymmetry. Exactly. And it's also respectful to women out there as well. You know what I mean? Because it's like he's saying, I don't really care. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, and also he was talking on a Zoom call with other people as well. And it shows that you're not making enough of an effort. Everyone else in his Zoom call probably had their nipples in the right area, and he came in like this. Now, maybe he was in a hurry. Maybe he was in a hurry and to a Zoom call and he didn't fix it up. But if I was one of the other people on that Zoom call, I would have thought, come on, let's put a bit more effort into that. I'm just saying, for me, I would have, not that I do that at all. I don't do that. But if I did, I would just put a bit more. That's all I'm saying. Just put a bit more effort. So I think there's a lot of projection on that side of politics to do with gay people and things like that. And that to me is the whole the whole Republican Party. It's full of a lot of people who are um, who are who don't want to be themselves. They seem to be angry at other people. Yes, definitely some asymmetry. Dude was likely trying to humiliate his wife for humiliating him. Possibly, yeah. Although, Dave, I did hear that. I don't know if this is true, Dave, but I did hear that it was a bit of an open secret within the Republican Party, and that a lot of people in the Republican Party knew what her husband was into on the side. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Look, it wouldn't surprise me if he was really into that, And I don't. This is the thing. I don't care. I think the thing about it is, for me, when I find out about a conservative does that, it's the hypocrisy. It's only the hypocrisy that bothers me, not the fact that he was doing it. I don't care that he was doing it. It's the hypocrisy. I do care that the nipple was up here. I do care. Yes, I do care about the nipple thing. I do care about the nipple placement. I actually feel very strongly about the nipple placement, very strongly about it. But had he brought the nipple down to the same position, I would be 100% supporting him. My criticism of him is not dressing up as a woman. It's not doing it well enough, which I think is fair enough, So again, I feel like, in the old United Kingdom, in England, back in the 90s and things like that, there used to be a lot of back in the 90s. There used to be a lot of Tories. Tories they're called conservatives in the United Kingdom in England. A Tory is a conservative, and you would often hear of a minister, like a politician, who was on the conservative side, and then you'd find out the tabloids would find out that the conservative politician was in his spare time wearing women's leggings, dressing up as a woman, doing very kinky stuff and things like that. But when they were in politics, they were often criticizing the left for not being too, not being like not being conservative enough, being too open world. So for me, it's always the hypocrisy of it. Again, if someone on the left, right? Actually, let me be more fair. Let's say someone on the right. So let's just say someone in the MAGA movement, right? a politician. And this particular politician is a conservative, but always says to everyone, you know what, I am a conservative, but I don't care if you're gay, do whatever you want. As long as what you're doing is legal, I don't give a shit. Now, if that conservative, we found out something about him or his wife or whatever, I would defend that person to the day I die. Because again, he wouldn't be a hypocrite, right? It's the ones that go after the LGBT community. It's the ones that go after people who are in open relationships or whatever it is on the left that they want to do. It's those are the people who are being hypocrites that are the ones that I go after or people should go after. But again, if you're on the right or you're on the left and you're not criticizing people for living their own lives, they are very concerned with the decency of others. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, exactly. And if you're voting for Trump, that's probably not your best, voting for Trump and then talking about, you're into like decency and stuff. That doesn't really work for you. So, but yeah, so I think, I think they don't have a big leg to stand on. They voted for someone who's not really a decent person. So the only positive thing I would say is, years and years ago, there was a guy, I don't know if you remember, I think it was 2004, there was a Democratic politician called Howard Dean. And during the primary, he was winning the primary. And then what happened is that he did this screech at the end of one of his rallies. And there was nothing to it. Like, honestly, it was the mildest thing on the planet. But because of the scream that he did, and it went viral back then, 2004, he basically plummeted. That was the end of him because he did a scream, right? Now, if that happened today, no one would even notice it. So I would say the only good thing is that I think the benchmark for being cancelled back then was way too low. And now the benchmark is way too high. So you need to find like a middle ground. Trump has done so much worse. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, 100%. So I think the only good thing is, you can have, he was copying McCain. Exactly. Yeah. So again, you can have, you don't have to be perfect to be a politician. I think you can have, like in my opinion, if I was going to become a politician, the worst thing you can do is try to make yourself out to be as prim as proper, right? The best thing to do is make yourself out to be fallible, to make yourself out to be very unperfect. I would go around every day and saying, nobody has done worse things than me. When I was younger, I said stupid stuff. I did stupid stuff. I'm not judging anybody else. I've said crazy stuff in my life because then what happens is by doing that, you inoculate yourself for anything that comes up in the future because someone will find someone you went to school with and they said, Joe made this joke when he was 18 years of age. And then I'll go, okay, yeah, I did. I made a joke. But if I was going around saying I'm prim and proper, then that joke, that the fact that happened, I could be criticized. However, if people found out I made a joke when I was 18 that was inappropriate, but I was going around going, yeah, I said stupid stuff all the time, it doesn't work on you because you already said that you said stupid stuff. So I think Trump in some ways did that because Trump had a history of, not being prim and proper, before. It kind of inoculated himself, right, from doing things in the future because people already knew that Trump was kind of like, he was sleeping around with a lot of people. He had the Miss Universe contests. So people's benchmark for him being inappropriate was much higher because of what he'd already done in the past. So if I was a Democrat at the next election, that reminds me of Justin Trudeau. Remember Justin Trudeau? He was criticizing other people for doing blackface, the blackface thing. And then they found photos of him doing blackface when he was younger. And then he copped so much shit because of it. Now, for me, that's silly. If I was Justin Trudeau, I would not have done that, right? Don't criticize people for doing things that you've done. you stay out of it, right? You stay out of it, or you say we've all done stupid stuff, or we don't, right? Because if once you elevate yourself to a certain level, it's much easier to bring you down. And pretty much all human beings have done stupid stuff. So I think Justin Trudeau learned a lesson that unless you've been 100% prim and proper your whole life, I wouldn't be throwing stones at other people for something they did 10, 20 years ago. Yeah, that's my thing on it. Yeah, and for me, if I enter politics, I would put my hand up to everything, and if they ever found anything about me, I would go, "What? I told you. I told you I wasn't great. I told you I said," and then inoculate. I'll get away with it. That's the Joe Thomas way. That's the Joe Thomas way in politics. Yeah. Um. So yeah. So that's pretty much it. But yeah, I think it's a lot of the the character stuff these days isn't as important. I think a lot of more people these days are voting on um, um, people who are either insiders or outsiders, people who are the establishment or the anti-establishment, right? And you don't want to be seen as the establishment. You want to be seen as the anti-establishment, and that's generally how people get voted in these days the most, right? You want to be seen as the outsider. The outsiders are the ones who seem to win. And unfortunately, Democrats always get put into this pigeonhole recently of being the establishment, the insiders, right? And that can sometimes work against Democrats. And Trump always tries to position himself as the outsider, and that sometimes works for him, right? Because you don't want the last thing I think Democrats want to do is say everything is good, everything is fantastic, there's nothing wrong with the economy, everything is going great, and then because a lot of people are not feeling that, right? They're not feeling things are going well, and if you want to beat all these far right wing parties that are sort of growing up around the world, if you want to beat those people, the best way to beat those people is by talking about the economy, right? Talking about cost of living, talking about prices, rents, right? Talking about cost, how much it costs for young people to buy a home. It's funny how few people talk about like young people these days, even though they are becoming the biggest block of voters around. Gen Z and millennials are becoming the biggest block of voters because the older generation are phasing out. And so if you want to capture that generation, you want to capture that generation with things that matter to them. And the things that matter to them, and I'm not saying that character doesn't matter, and I'm not saying that Trump being an authoritarian doesn't matter, but at the end of the day, it's been proven over and over again, people will vote for someone, even if they think that person is a bad person, if they think that person is going to help them buy a home, lower the rents. And look at Zoran Mandami, right? Zoran Mandami, what got Zoran Mandami elected, right? It's not that a lot of people love democratic socialists or socialists. It's not that, think about the mayors of New York right before, right? You had Giuliani, a Republican, right? There's been a lot of Republican mayors of New York. There've been Republican governors. There've been Republican, and a lot of the Democratic governors in New York were actually moderates, right? And then suddenly you get Zoran Mandami, who's way to the left of any other mayor, most mayors, and he gets elected. And he gets elected. Why does he get elected? He doesn't get elected because he's a democratic socialist. People don't care about the label, right? They don't care about the label. They don't care that he says he's democratic socialist. And a lot of people voted for MAGA. They don't care that people were saying it's a far right-wing group. They're voting for whoever. Again, younger people don't care about labels. They don't care about. They're not wedded to the Democratic Party, and they're not wedded to the Republican Party. They're wedded to policies that are going to help their lives get better. And Democrats need to understand this because Trump came in not as a Republican, but more as an independent. Trump was seen as an independent within the Republican Party. Zoran Mandami was seen as an independent within the Democratic Party. So what you're seeing is people that are winning, even though they're attached to a main party, they're not seen as the establishment of either one of that party. Zoran Mandami was hated by the moderates in the party, right? Zoran Mandami was hated by Chuck Schumer, all those people in the Democratic Party, the establishment. Trump was hated by the establishment in the Republican Party. And yet the fact that they were hated within those parties was not a negative, it was a positive. They were seen as the outsiders. They were seen as the independents, right? And they were seen at all those things. Now, that's the thing that gets people voting these days. Not Republican, not Democrat. What can you do for me? Not whether you're a democratic socialist, not whether you consider yourself far right or centrist or centre left. It's what can you do for me? What did Zoran Mandami do that made him popular? He did TikTok videos. He went into areas in New York that voted for Donald Trump. He literally picked places that voted for Donald Trump at the last election. He deliberately did that. Why did he do that? Because he didn't want to be seen as just pandering to his own party. He wanted to understand. So what does that do? That shows the people in New York, if you voted for Trump, just say I'm Zoran Mandami, if you voted for Trump, Zoran is saying to those people, I don't care that you voted for Trump. It doesn't bother me that you voted for Trump. I want you to vote for me. I want to find out why you vote. So he's listening. First of all, he's listening. He's not just talking to them. Democrats, what about it? Democrats are bad at listening. Democrats are like the school teacher. Democrats are like, no. You got that wrong. No, that's all wrong. No, you need to do this. You need to do that. You need to do this, right? That's what the Democratic Party has lost the ability to talk to working class people. The Democratic Party has lost the ability to talk to people who are outside of their bubble, right? That's why Kamala Harris, what did she do at the 2024 election? She spent all her time talking to CNN, MSNBC, Rachel Maddow, right? It's just the liberal bubble. How does that help? Now, in 2024, the majority of independent voters and the majority of swing voters, the ones that matter, do not watch MSNBC, do not watch CNN, do not watch Fox News. They either tune out all politics and they don't live in the political world, or they're not interested in hearing Trump is a bad person. They're interested in hearing what policies are going to make my life better. What are you going to do to make my life better? I have 2 young children. We rent. The rent keeps going up, right? Oh, but Trump's an authoritarian. Okay, great. What are you going to do for I have 2 young children. I can't afford to buy Trump's an authoritarian. Okay, what are you going to do for my children? You get what I'm saying? You can't win an election by saying Trump is authoritarian. I agree that Trump is authoritarian. I agree with all that. But Democrats need to get out of that. And they need to get into what do the voters want to hear? What did Zoran Mandami do? Zoran Mandami did not go into the areas in New York and talk to the people that voted for Trump and went up to him and he didn't go, did you vote for Trump? Yeah, I did. You're an idiot. You're an absolute idiot. I can't believe you voted for Trump. You really voted for Trump. Put this on. Are you getting this? This guy voted for Trump. This guy is an idiot. I can't believe. I just wanted to say that, by the way. So now I will preface this with saying that I do think some people who voted for Trump are idiots. I get that, but I'm not running for politics. So I like. Do I want to see someone do that? Sure. On one hand, I would love to see that. But that's not going to get you elected, right? I want to see Democrats get elected. I want to see far right-wing parties lose in America, Australia, UK, everywhere. I do not want to see far right parties anywhere. And I know for a fact that putting your finger like this doesn't win elections, because elections aren't won by the left. They're not won, but they won by independents. And so what Zoran Mandami did, right, is that he went there and he spoke to these people, and he said, "Why did you vote for Trump?" And they said, I didn't really know. This is what a lot of them said. I didn't really know that much about Trump. I don't follow politics very closely, but rents have gone up. My wife and I just had a baby and we can't afford to buy a place. And it was like these were not people with MAGA hats on. These were not people at the rallies with two teeth, right? These were just ordinary New Yorkers who don't really pay attention to politics a lot. But the only thing they knew was their life wasn't going very well and they blamed the incumbent government. And then Trump came in and he said, "I'm going to make your life better." And so they rolled the dice, right? They rolled the dice because they thought it can't get worse, right? And so they wanted to believe the lies. And this is how Zoran Mandani got elected. He got elected by listening, not by telling people what they want to do. He got elected by listening. And Democrats need to get back to doing that, listening, right? And learning to listen to working class people and learning to listen to people about the economy. Because the fact of the matter is that economics is the reason why people vote. It's the number one reason why people vote is economics. So whenever you're on Substack or you're on Twitter or you're on social media, it's important to know that the majority of people who are going to get Trump elected or not elected or get a Democrat elected are not using these platforms. They're not involved in this. They just go to work, they have children, and they don't have time to talk. Love Zoran Mandami and the world needs more like him. Exactly. Yeah. He lived his own life and embraced all people. Exactly, Kate. Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, he didn't make it a left wing or right wing thing, right? And it just shows that people do not care. The days of I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican are over, right? I mean, not for everyone. Don't get me wrong. They're not over for everyone, but it's the percentage of people who vote just based on I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican is continually going down, 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 down all the time. And the same in Australia. People are less tied to a political party in Australia than they were before. That's the same in the UK. That's the same in that. So people now, what they're seeing is that they're seeing centre-left parties get elected, then they see a centre-right party get elected, then a centre-left, centre-right, and their life doesn't change, right? Their life might change a little bit, but it doesn't change a lot, right? The truth of the matter is, had Kamala Harris been elected, still things would have been bad. Like, it would have been a little bit better. Don't get me wrong. Things would have been a little bit better, but inflation would have still been high. Cost of living would have still been high because the things to do with housing, these are not problems that can be solved in 6 months or a year. They're things that are going to take 5 or 10 years to solve. These are really long-term problems, right? And nobody can switch. So that's the problem, is at the moment you have problems all around the world where people feel their lives are not financially going well, especially for younger people, and they feel like they've been dudded. So you also, here's the other thing, a lot of people that voted for Zoran Mandami weren't actually just like working class people. He had a lot of people. This is a new group of people that are now coming up, and a lot of them are voting for the Democrats. And this particular group is not the old working class group, like who work in factories or that sort of thing. This particular group, this new group, is actually people who got a university degree, a college degree, and they paid huge amounts to go to college because they thought, based on previous on what happened in history in previous times, that if they got that college degree, that yes, they would end up with a debt, but they would be able to pay that debt off and then they would make a lot of money. Unfortunately, because of AI, because of the way things are structured, robotics, the way a lot of things are structured differently, you have a whole bunch of people who are well-meaning who went and spent 4 years or 6 years studying, like, I don't know, like engineering, like software engineers, right? You spent 4 years studying software engineering, you come out, and now your job doesn't exist anymore. A lot of those people are really angry now and they voted for Zoran Mandami. That was a big, high tuition. That's right. So what happened to these people? These people now have a massive debt and they don't have a job. So they spent 4 years of their life studying their asses off, and now they have this massive debt and they don't have a job. That is the worst of the worst. Like, you think about that, right? Back in the old times, if you had, not the old times, even like 10 years ago, you would go, you knew you were going into debt, but you thought, "No, it doesn't matter. I'm going to be on a high wage. I'll be able to make. But now it's like, it's all so bad. And so I totally understand. I have a 20-year-old son who's currently at university. And one of his friends was studying web design for websites, like web design. And he'd been studying it for 2 years. But because web design now has become so like AI has kind of taken over web design, it's been automated. He's basically stopped doing it after 2 years and he's changed to do something else, right? So he spent 2 years studying this particular course at university. He now has a debt. He's got to pay that for 2 years. And now he's going to have to spend another 4 years, so 2 more years that he's going to do something that is going to be hopefully not being taken over by AI. For my son, luckily he picked something in the healthcare industry, and the healthcare industry is one of those industries that is actually growing. So again, I think I understand the why young people are really angry. I understand why they're angry. And a lot of these people, if you look at the people who voted for Zoran Mandami, a big chunk of those were people with university degrees who now have massive debts and can't get a job. That is the new group of people that never really existed before. We never had a group of people that was so large that, did all the right things. What were you told at school? Go to university, and if you go to university, you'll have a good life. That was what you were told to do, and that was generally true. That was a true thing, right? And I'd still think, generally speaking, going to university is still a very positive thing, but you just got to be careful what you do, right? You've got to try to, but it is riskier. It is riskier now to go to university in some areas, not all areas. Obviously, if you go to, if you're going to become a doctor, that's different. If you're going to become an engineer, that's different. There's certain jobs that are still going to, there are certain jobs that are still going to do well for you if you're at university, right? But some jobs to do with technology, they might not be there by the time you finish. So again, I understand why young people feel like they've been cheated. They've been cheated, right? Because my generation, Gen X, previous generations, most of those people who went to university ended up doing okay for themselves, right? And Gen X and Gen Z and millennials, they were told the same thing, but they're having a different outcome, right? So I totally get it. And so some of these people, most of these people are not going to the far right. Most of these people are looking at parties like Zoran Mandami or the Greens, right? Or Bernie Sanders, right? They're looking more to the left than to the right, okay? So because generally speaking, better educated people will move to the left. I mean, better educated people might have been centre-right, but there's no real centre-right in America anymore. There's only really far-right and centre-left, right? The centre-right doesn't really exist. It got taken over by MAGA. This is the same in Australia. There's no centre-right party anymore. The centre-right party now is One Nation, a far right-wing party. In the United Kingdom, in England, there's no real centre-right party. It's now the Nigel Farage Reform Party, which is the big right-wing party. Centre-right parties all around Western nations have been replaced by the far right. Luckily, centre-left parties still exist. And what's happening is a lot of the old centrist and centre right people have now moved to the centre left parties. Yeah, from that point of view. Okay. So anyway, thank you everyone for joining me. Thank you, Scott. So sorry, Scott. I just finished. Thanks everyone for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a really good time. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Barbara. Thanks this time. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Paolo, if you're still there, everyone. Really enjoyed it. Thanks, Kate101 for joining me. Thanks, Karen, everyone. Dave from California, Patricia, everyone. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. Had so much fun doing it. Thanks a lot, Evelyn. Everyone is there. Have a great time. See you later. Bye-bye.